Hello, fellow humans. This is M and V, and this show we talk about many different things, ranging from all sorts of topics. And usually it's just a discussion on things that we've been pondering. So today we're actually going to be talking about like generational differences and then generational beef that people will have with each other. So I think to like narrow this topic, most of the time when we think of like generational differences, we're thinking of like a big scale, right? Like macro, like Gen Zers versus millennials. Damn you boomers, all that jazz. But for today, I would want it to like narrow that down more into a family unit. Because ultimately generational differences there, or even that sort of conflict that happens is less about like cultural differences between generations and more so the position of the family, I think. What do you think about that, V?
I think since you brought it down to a smaller scale, you have no choice but to use the individual pieces, so to speak. So definitely going by uh, position in the family and so on and so forth. I think that definitely helps narrow it down because that's kind of what you have to work with. So
Yeah.
I agree.
I mean, but do you think that, in my opinion, like cultural differences between generations, like Gen Zers versus millennials, I don't think necessarily show up that much very clearly within like individual family units.
Yeah, again, I think it goes back to the macro versus the micro thing. If you're on a macro scale, it's on average it's harder to notice differences because you're using such vast majorities of people in groups and stuff like that. If you're just doing micro, it's a little bit easier. You're a little bit more down home, so you can notice the differences a little bit better, I should say. It's like, for example, the planets when you're using astrology, the planets that are closest to the Earth, we give those more importance because their influence and their energy is closer to the moon and the sun. I know they're not planets, but in astrology they are. Versus, let's say, Pluto, for example, it's so far away, it's on such a macro scale, we
Mhm.
don't consider that. I had to throw my astrology in there. If you know me, you know I'm an astrology nerd. But
Mhm.
so that's kind of how I see it.
Oh,
You are it is to tell differences. Am I making sense?
kind of. I'm trying. I'm sorry. I'm not an astrology nerd, so I'm trying. I'm trying, V. I'm trying.
You are. You are.
But okay, so at least we're on agreement there in that, like, narrowing it down, we can see it a bit better via positions. So
Yes.
going into this, I feel like a majority of the reasons why there's issues between generations or even positions in the family is because of
Mm-hmm.
like three main factors, right? First
Mm-hmm.
being that like people usually think their reasons for doing things make sense.
Yeah.
Like, second, that people will usually think that like problems they see in others should be avoided for themselves. So, for example, um, sometimes when I'll see uh, family members that do a particular thing that I think is unreasonable, I will try to avoid that action as much as possible. Like,
Mm-hmm.
not cleaning the house until someone comes over and then just starts like crazy
Mm-hmm.
cleaning the house. I'll see, man, that's stressful. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
actively think I should avoid that behavior, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Have you had an experience like that?
Um, I wouldn't necessarily. I don't. I should put it this way. I don't have any experiences that come to mind.
Mm-hmm.
As far as like to avoid people's actions, I feel like I'm the opposite. I wouldn't say trendsetter, but I'm like telling people what actions to take. If
Mm.
you don't know, I'm the firstborn in my family, so I want to tell people how to do things. So it's not so much that I see faults and I want to avoid them. I'm the one telling people avoid the mistakes. So
Mm.
that's just, if that makes sense. I'm the starter.
Yeah, so maybe to clarify number two, people see faults in others and either
Mm-hmm.
personally want to avoid them or to advise others to avoid them.
Yeah, you could
Okay.
say that.
And then like the third thing I usually want to think about when people are interacting is that people usually think that they can reflect on their choices and opinions clearly. So, meaning like
Mm-hmm.
I can look back on my choices and I'll say, "Oh, now I understand why that's like wrong," or "Oh, I understand why like I'm totally in the right." Where that doesn't necessarily work because personally, we can't always see our actions clearly, like from a third party's perspective.
Yeah. Or you could also say other people can't see our actions clearly. So we might end up being scapegoats in some families because people don't understand our reasoning. Or
Yeah,
I
and then
understand eventually.
no, that kind of comes back to like my number one point is that people usually think their conclusions are reasonable. So like, I mean, maybe people will have an idea that of why they're doing something, and they'll realize that for their situation, for their circumstances, for everything that's happened to them, the conclusion they came to was understandable. Whereas, like, as you said, from an outside perspective, maybe they can't see the reasoning clearly. That I could understand too. Is that what you mean?
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. No,
Yep.
thank you. You're, you're helping me.
Yeah.
Uh, so transferring that to like how people interact within a family, I feel like this is where a lot of issues arise with family members trying to discuss how a household should run or how people should interact within a family. So I guess from there, I think the only kind of qualities or cultures that I think are very significant within a household is like the goals of the younger generation versus the goals of the older generation.
Mhm.
So my understanding is usually for the younger generation, there is this goal to like quickly try to fix things that they think are bad or that they think is not necessary.
Mhm.
Would you agree with that or
Um, if someone or person did something bad or unreasonable, in my experience, I'm to be fair, my to clarify my answer, I my one of my coping skills is avoidance. So I just avoid things and act like they're not happening. So
mm,
for me personally, as a younger person, saw something that I deemed unreasonable, I just ignored it. I never would try to change it.
mm,
Personal experience, but I do see the reasoning behind it. You see little kids do stuff, and it might look kind of silly to an adult, but really, like you're saying, it's them trying to change something that they don't like. I see kids like that where I work at. They don't like something, they want to change something. They make. I'm that type of person, so I don't always, but I see it happen. I see it happen definitely.
Mm, okay. So, do you think I should, the goal is more so for youths to independently solve problems?
I would say that if they feel motivated enough to do so, that's the big thing. I
Mm,
would say they have to be motivated to do so. I learned that you have intrinsic motivation, you have extrinsic motivation, and most people kind of lean towards one or the other. Typically, intrinsic is for introverts; they have to have a personal feeling for it, and then extrinsic is for extroverts. Typically, they have to be externally stimulated by it. So I think every person will want to change something in the world, but it
mm,
has to be something they're motivated by. So
mm,
I don't know who this person is, but I've had things that have lit me up on fire and it's made me so passionate that I wanted to go and change something about it.
mm,
So it's definitely possible. It's just I think how you go about it.
mm. Okay. So, yeah, I would agree, like the whole like being intrinsically or extrinsically motivated. I think is less has less to do with the the generational differences and as you said like more personality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm. But for youth, I think like this concept of like being motivated to change something.
Mm-hmm.
I said one of the drawbacks is that usually they want to change something without clearly seeing the situation. So going back to the point of fault that people usually can't look at a situation as you said clearly from a third person perspective. And then they'll time at times maybe demonize older like generations for past mistakes that they made.
Mm-hmm.
No. Would you agree with that assessment?
I think them blaming elders, that's something I can definitely agree with.
Mm,
Because we look to our elders thinking, at least at our youngest, we look at them as gods almost. They're the
mm,
ones who give us shelter, food, love, all the good stuff. And when we start to become a sentient age and realize that for some people, not always, but for some people, their life has gone to crap or they live a crappy lifestyle, they point to the elders and say, "You're the reason that it's like this." And maybe it's true, maybe it's not, depends on the situation. Um, Vantage points need to be accounted for. But I think even the most privileged, what we call maybe the most privileged people, families, the young ones will always try to find a way to nitpick at their lifestyle and say you weren't there for me, you were at a business meeting, or poor segments you enough money if you couldn't support a family then you knew that anyways that great you can really see that the youth at some point once in their life they really do for their life choices and how they've raised them at
mm.
some point. That's just me. There's a lot of ground to cover. But
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing with everything you're saying. Like, I think a lot of times, kind of going back to the points, is that we don't recognize that elders probably had reasons for coming to the conclusions that they did or making the mistakes that they did. I mean, whether or
mm-hmm.
not we want to discuss whether they're mistakes. Like, and I think sometimes that's why history may be doomed to repeat itself, in that because the younger generation may not fully understand why an issue arose, they
Mm-hmm.
just want to quickly fix it. They don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily fix the problem, but
Mm-hmm.
almost more so create the problem again without realizing it.
Yeah. The way I see it, life is a circle, kind of like the circle
Mm.
of life. Blah 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 blah. We all start out as babies, and then we all end up as like worm food
Mhm.
for seeds. So we have our cycle, and our businesses or something that we leave a lasting mark on the world. Even that happens. Businesses go down. Uh, Children of your offspring, they all die eventually at some point. Um, Everything happens. So while we're trying to fix our what we call our elders' problems, we forget that we're gonna head in that direction pretty soon, God willing. And so we'll probably end up making the same mistakes just with a different name. Only this time it's gonna be in the metaverse. Our kids are gonna be like, why didn't you allow it to be in the metaverse and blah 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 blah. Like back in my day, all we had was dial up. Do you know what that is? You couldn't use the telephone at the same time that you're using the internet because it wouldn't work.
Mhm.
So don't talk to me about the metaverse. That's
Mhm.
gonna be us.
Yeah.
Same thing, just different name.
Yeah. No, I got you. I got you. So, go since you've made that transitioned into the elder generation. Um,
Mhm.
I said, or at least I think, more often the elder generation, their goal is to like pass down knowledge, which is slightly connected to like keeping the youthful generation from making the same mistakes they did.
Mhm.
I would just say that the knowledge part and then preventing mistakes are kind of connected. And then another big one is continue a
Mhm.
tradition of some kind. Like have like perpetuate almost a real ritualistic um circumstances at some point.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean by like by
I
that? Like,
agree wholeheartedly.
oh, okay. So
Say
you
that last part.
understand when I say like ritual ceremonies?
We've actually had this conversation off camera,
Okay.
and I think we have slightly different views of what a ritual versus is. Not that far off. I think gangs of it. So I don't know if you remember the conversation that we had about it, but
You're gonna have to remind
I
me.
do.
Sorry.
Well, like I was talking, I'm gonna have my children learn dance lessons, do martial arts. I'm very high-minded, guys. I'm not sure if this is all gonna happen, but it's my dream. And then to have them have a business,
Mm.
and I'm also gonna teach them how to eat. I want to teach them how to take care of their bodies and how to eat food, certain foods. And these are all my traditions. I'm gonna have certain birthdays means certain number in astrology to me. So I'm on a certain birthday. I'm going to have like a little thing for them. They're just going to move their number on a little clipboard. That's just my. These are my personal traditions because I believe that we don't have these feminine and masculine traditions and stuff like that. Like we have quinceañeras for the Latin culture. We have debuts for the Filipino culture. We have Sweet 16 for the American culture. I just want to kind of continue that with my children in my personal way. I'm going to use the other things I said, astrology, food, um,
Yeah.
dancing, and martial arts.
Mm. Yeah. So I think like
Yeah.
where we kind of differ on like our idea of like tradition and like a ritualistic uh events is like I would
Mm-hmm.
consider like the moving the number, what
Mm-hmm.
you described, that I would think that as like ritualistic, where it's something that happens um over and over again in like the same
Mhm.
manner, but to mark an event or to mark the
Mhm.
passage of time. That's for
Mhm.
me what I mean by like some type of ritualistic tradition that is consistent over many, many years, that is there to help build community.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mm.
So,
I mean, do you agree with the elder goals?
I definitely do. Like, I'm not that old. I'm getting there, but I feel like an elder already. Like, feel like I have so much knowledge that I want to give to people, and I
Mm.
just feel like ever since I was a little girl, I can remember wanting to be a teacher.
Mm.
Basically, I just want to get knowledge out to the people, my personal knowledge, that I feel would be helpful to younger generations to, like you said, prevent from making certain mistakes, or at least to. I believe in the saying, "Know thyself, and to thyself be true." I want to instill self knowledge into people and teach them tools and ways of how to learn their self. That way, they can go out into the world confidently. If that makes
Mm.
sense. So I definitely this whole elder thing. I'm already an elder.
That's actually what I was kind of curious about. Like, do you consider yourself more geared towards like the youth goals or the elder goals?
It's kind of tough to say because, well, when you're thinking about wanting to change things, I feel youthful going off of your definitions. But at the same time, I recognize that I still have so much to learn. So it's
Mm.
hard for me to say that I'm an elder A. And a lot of what I have on theory.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't fully. I would love to test my theories out on other people. Do more about that if we have time later. But that's where I see myself. What about you? Why are you laughing?
Because I identify with you so much. Like, I'm in this in between phase where,
Mm-hmm.
for me, I am starting to really value traditions and value like continual rituals that people will do. But I don't feel like I'm yet at the point where I want to pass down knowledge. Because as you said, I feel like I don't have enough knowledge yet. I'm like, I still need to learn about shit before I can start like telling other people how to live their life. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like these conversations are the epitome of us trying to figure out our shit.
Basically,
Yeah.
basically.
So no, I just
Well,
identified a lot with what you said. Um,
I'm glad.
but the caveat I would put with elders though is that something I find might be a downturn. No, something that is a con for the elders is that they may be stubborn in accepting new ideas, even if it's to their detriment. So
Yeah,
sticking with a way of living, even if it's like not helpful.
yeah. I'm kind of like that too, in certain ways.
Mm,
Not all the ways. I'm not stubborn in all the ways, but
mm,
I think when you've lived a certain life and you've gotten good results from it,
mm,
you don't want to change it. Like just saying this if it ain't type of thing.
mm,
And maybe it is actually broke, but they've been doing it for so long. It's way more. Think of a child grown up. Children are so versatile they can change at the drop of a hat. But to do it for an adult to change a certain habit, it's very difficult because of
mm,
where they are in life. Um, they have lived such a full life. They have had. Another analogy that I think of is like people language learning. So
mm,
babies are essentially open. You drop a baby off anywhere in the world, they will learn that language by a certain age, and they will stick to that. But before they learn it, they're Once you're like in your 60s and up, and you've only spoken one language your whole life, it's not that you can't learn another language. It's just that it's going to be convoluted. It's going to be a lot of restructure, and you have to figure out new pathways to get it done. So it's not impossible. It's just difficult because you have such set narrow pathways compared to a baby who has essentially none.
Mm.
So
Yeah, and I mean, like, I think what you said about if it ain't broke, don't fix it is a really interesting concept. In that, like, sometimes I think with the elder community, they don't realize that it's been broken. You've just been like driving this honky tonk car. You know what I mean? Like, I I think the benefit of the youth generation pushing the elder generation in that way is for the elder generation to reassess the reasoning behind why they do something.
mm-hmm.
Like, if they've had a good reason for doing such, they'll be able to pass down that knowledge, right? But if, like,
Mm-hmm.
their reasoning for a certain situation has been lost time, or they don't have like a good reasoning behind it, it's like it's a way for them to reevaluate, I think. Mm.
Yeah, I think by the time a elder has really perfected a certain skill, we call it a tradition at that point.
Mm.
If that makes sense.
Mm.
And we want to sound tradition. It's so old fashioned, it's so outdated. Why are you doing this? And there's so much culture that can be lost. Don't allow some of these elders or but if it's a stupid tradition, like let's say, I don't know, bring a dirty pig into your house for good luck, and don't kill it. Just let a dirty pig run around in your house because it brings good luck. That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of a stupid tradition. Maybe we should get rid of that one. But like for example, bringing the Christmas tree into your homes, it is still kind of stupid, but it doesn't hurt anybody. Just let
That's
grandma have her
nice.
tree, okay? Let grandma have her tree.
Okay. Oh, so another one before we get into like the questions back and forth is like, oh, how are we doing on time actually?
We're 30 minutes in.
30 minutes? Oh, I apologize.
No, you're fine.
Should we start
You want to
wrapping
ask?
up?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So some questions that I had. Um, I think the most like important one I had was like, do you think there's such a thing as a healthy amount of like issues within a family? Or do you think like
I think.
these Oh, go ahead, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're right. No, it's okay. I've got your notes here, so I can read along.
Mhm.
Um, I would say there is a healthy amount. I guess if you could call it that, because they'll never. When you're living in such close quarters with people, you are bound to have conflict. Something's going to happen. They're chewing gum too loud. They're slipping their slippers on the floor too loud. Something is going to annoy somebody at some point to where they want to say something.
Mhm.
I think the beauty in it is working it out, which I believe your family does a great job of talking to each other. It was not necessarily the greatest at communication. So I believe that a family that communicates is better than a family that brushes it under the rug. That's probably where I get my avoidance from. Now that I think about it, okay, that's my answer.
Mm. Yeah, and I mean, I agree. I think there is like a healthy amount of tension that a family can have. And if anything, it like helps progress the family in healthy directions. When that tension is managed in some way, is like not shoved to the side, but addressed and like pushing the family forward. I guess another part of that question would be, do you think the tension between the youth and elders is necessary for
I
the
don't think
growth of a family?
it's. I wouldn't say it's necessary. I think in certain cultures, I don't have any that come to mind, but in
Mm-hmm.
certain, I think the youth and the uh, elders, I think they actually work together. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
no one's aside. But in my mind, in V world, in V's imagination, certain cultures have it where they work together. Like you told me, I think this isn't exactly the same thing, but there is a place where you'd have an older wife and a young wife, and the older wife's job was to help the young wife learn how to be a good wife to their husband. Um, and she had different roles in the tribe because obviously she couldn't bear children, or the younger one could.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's just you learn so much from each other. There doesn't always have to be attention. There shouldn't be a constant state of tension. I'll put it that way. Like I believe it'll happen like in spurts, kind of like those inconsistent spurts, like lab tests where they gave the crack.
Yeah.
But there's very intermittently, so you never knew when it was going to happen.
Mm.
Um, I that's how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I should clarify in that like usually tension is like a stretch and release sort of thing where you're like you have this tension build up and then there's a release from figuring out a solution to the problem of the tension. So there's like this constant push and
Mm-hmm.
pull. For me, I do think there is like this natural tension that is necessary within a family from the elders and the youths. I think they are usually, the tension between them usually spur on some type of reformation or clarification on ideas or values that a family holds. And I feel like it makes the family bond a bit stronger.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, I'm sorry for talking for so long. All right.
Oh no, it's okay. We're at 35.
All right. So I think that's a good time for us to end,
Mm-hmm.
right? All right. Well,
Yeah, we can
thank you.
always talk more about it off camera.
Okay. All right. Thank you, fellow humans, for listening to our conversation. This is M and V, and we are saying good day.
Good day, sir.
Okay.
Okay.